alleged scientific errors inside the Bible and the Quran. Now, where we left off, if you listen to our last discussion, which will be inside the description, it's very interesting. It's something I want kind of everybody to notice here. One of the many ways which people try to hide or try to cover up the scientific errors in their holy book is by telling us this is something which is metaphorical, this is allegorical, it's a figure of speech, because they're trying to reconcile a direct conflict between modern science, what science has proven to be true, versus a statement in their holy book. For example, we talked about the mustard seed being the smallest seed which you plant in the ground. We know from science today that's not true. So they say, okay, well, this is something metaphorical, allegorical, things like that. What's interesting to note, when we look in the Quran and when we challenge the Quran in the same way, will those same explanations come forward? It's all metaphorical. This is all allegorical. It is true there are metaphors and allegories in scripture. Sure there are. But it's also equally true that this is used as a device, as a way to hide the errors. All right, so we're going to look at another error, and we're going to go for 1 minute back and forth. I'm going to get my little timer here. We're going to go ahead and let me just introduce to you guys what the topic is going to be. It's going to be talking about another scientific error, alleged scientific error in the Bible. And so let's go there here real quick. We're just going to go just a second. There you go. Now, let me make this a little bit bigger. Now, in the Bible, it actually contains something like a virginity test. Let me just explain what the issue here, which we're going to be discussing. So the Bible says that basically, and they shall, so we're talking about to determine a woman's virginity, as we can see over here. It says, and that they shall spread the garments before the elders of the city. So the elders of the city shall take the man and chastise them, and they shall and they shall fine him 100 shekels of silver, and give it to the girl's father because he publicly defamed a virgin of Israel. However, if the charge is true, no proof of the young woman's virginity. Do you see that? No proof of the young virginity can be found. That's the scientific error. There is no way you can prove science today tells us there is no real way you can prove a woman's virginity. Hymen breakage or whatever you think might be the case, that's there are women who are born without hymens. There are people who can ride horseback, who can go on horseback and they can break that way. There's so many ways the hymen can be ruptured. But not only that, but there are women who have been sexually abused. They're not going to pass this test. And then the Bible continues, she shall be brought to the door of her father's house, and there men of her own town shall stone her to death. She should be stoned to death for simply not bleeding or whatever you think. But the point here is there is no such thing as proof of a woman's virginity. Now the Quran, or when we look at it in Quran, in Islam, we find there's no virginity test. But not only that, but we see a correction to the scientific error. It says over here, the most wicked among people. This is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying this. The most wicked among people in the eyes of Allah on the day of judgment is the man who goes to his wife and she comes to him and he divulges her secret, like spreading the bed sheets and seeing blood or no blood or whatever you think that might be. Whatever happens behind those doors, it stays there. Don't tell people about what's going on. So here we see a clear, correction to really a terrible scientific error, which can defame women, stigmatize them forever. So let's have a quick discussion. Jay would like to defend this, and so let me go ahead and stop my share here. Go ahead, Jay. Go for 1 minute. Go, please.
Well, I'd like to say just a few brief things before my 1 minute, if you wouldn't mind. Just that sure. Basically, I've done response videos on my own channel to each of the issues we have brought up, with the exceptions being, I believe, I don't remember what, but one of the 6 I did not end up getting around to because we actually discussed it in our first debate. So I just wanted to point that out for the audience so that they could get more a little bit more fleshed out the positions that I have, both on the mustard seed, virginity test, ark capacity, basically, everything that we've have gone over and will go over in the future, unless of course we have new information. So I just wanted to point that out very quickly. I also wanted to just briefly point out that I do believe that we should at some point in time have, and don't get me wrong, I do appreciate these discussions, absolutely. But I do want a little bit more of, at some point, just something slightly structured, I guess, simply so that we can kind of have, obviously, I know 25 minutes is kind of long in those traditional style debates, but like the 10 minutes, 5 minutes that we get kind of on modern day debate.
We're just having a discussion, just to talk.
Well, yeah, right. Simply because I think a lot of times the back and forth can kind of sometimes be a little bit too quick. And that's just my personal opinion. But with that being said, I want to just go straight into the argument here for today. So I got Deuteronomy 22 and 13:21 up.
Right, go for 1 minute.
I got the screen share here. Am I able to do that?
Oh, yeah. Let me give permission here. Let's see, where are you? Go ahead.
All right, yeah, thank you, sir. So let's see here. All right, so I got Deuteronomy 22, 13 through 21 up here at the moment. And of course, the part that we are specifically focusing on here is the virginity test itself, right? It talks about if a man hate her and, has speech against her, so on and so forth. So it says, the damsel's father, if we start at 16, shall say unto the elders, I give my daughter unto this man's wife, and he hated her, and lo, he hath given occasion of speech against her, saying, I found not thy daughter a maid, and yet here are the tokens of my daughter's virginity, and they shall spread the cloth before the elders of the city. So notice the focus here, and yet these are the tokens of my daughter's virginity. In other words, what is the father saying in this situation? He is saying, because of the fact that there is a broken hymen here, I can prove definitively that my daughter was a virgin. Notice what he's not saying. He's not necessarily saying that the absence of evidence is proving anything. And once we go a little bit more back and forth, because of course this is only going to be a short 1 minute thing, I'll be able to give some further context as to how we know there would be other standards that would need to be met as well. But just if we just take this on face value, he is not saying that because of a lack of this, we know for a fact she's not a virgin. Rather, he's saying we do actually have blood on the bedsheet, and therefore we know that she is a virgin. And
okay. So let me go ahead and respond to that. It says very clearly in the Bible that, first of all, the whole act of determining a virgin is an act of stupidity, really, from a scientific point of view. I can show you countless references from science which states there is no accurate way to determine a woman's virginity. Okay, we know there are women. Let me ask you a question. What is going to happen? Let's say a woman has been sexually abused. Okay, and I don't want you to give your opinion, but I want you to tell me from the text of the Bible. A woman who has been sexually abused, what is she going to do in this situation from the text of the Bible? Go ahead.
Right, so there's two things. Neither one of them are going to be opinion, just so we're clear. So the first thing is just a strictly scientific thing. Notice what your objection says, right? What is she going to do if she was sexually abused as a child, or if she was born without a hymen, or so on and so forth, right? In other words, the absence of that blood would not prove she is not a virgin. And every scientific study you could show me will say you cannot prove definitively that somebody is not a virgin, which is true. Barring obviously some evidence of being caught in the act or something along those lines. But you can prove definitively whether somebody is a virgin, right? And to give you an example, right, if I find your fingerprints on a firearm, I can prove you held it. If I do not find your fingerprints on a firearm, that does not necessarily mean you did not hold it. For example, you could have been wearing gloves, you could have wiped it down, so on and so forth, right? So we need to make perfectly clear both what the science says and what the Bible says, right?
Sure.
This is being presented as positive evidence, not negative evidence. That does get us into some other texts of the same book, namely Deuteronomy. So if we look at Deuteronomy 17 and 6, and of course I still have my screen up here.
Okay, I'll tell you what, let me go ahead and take my 1 minute here. Okay, so I'm just going to share my desktop here real quick. Well, I guess where's my, my
I got to stop my share real quick, sorry.
Yeah, please. Okay, go ahead. Let me find my, okay, let me share screen. Oh, I gotta take that permission away from you. Just give me 1 second here. Reclaim host. There we go. Okay, so I wish the Bible authors were as generous and considerate as you are here. But the problem is the Bible says, however, if however the charge is true, you see, if however the charge is true, and no proof of the young woman's virginity can be found, but there is no such thing as proof to begin with. This is a scientific error. Then she is to be stoned to death in front of her father's house. So it says here, if, however, the charge is true and no proof of the young woman's virginity can be found, there is no such thing. It's like talking about gargoyles. Okay, again, what I'm trying to get you to understand, the whole act of trying to determine a woman's virginity is a misguided from a point of view of science and just human reasoning. Can you accept that?
Well, no, because the thing is, you have to understand the difference between the positive and negative proofs here, right? No proof of the young woman's virginity is essentially the same thing as saying there's no proof that you didn't hold the gun. Like, that's why I compared the gun to the woman in that particular situation, right? The lack of fingerprints, like I said, does not necessarily mean you did not have it, and of course, other things need to be determined in order to prove that. But
why should a woman go through all of this? What is the point of going through all this?
Well, both the Qur'an and the Bible are very clear as far as their need for sexual purity. I would think we would definitely agree on that.
To try to prove it?
Well, obviously, there's got to be some way you're going to prove it if you're going to make it a law.
No, you don't have to prove it. Oh my God, no.
But if it's going to be a law, you need some way to prove it. Otherwise, people would abuse that in either way. They would either say, "No, I didn't do it," and just get away with it.
No one's going to abuse anything. Let people have their private lives. I mean, I don't understand what you're saying. Do you understand what it says? If, however, the charge is true, what does this mean to you? If, however, the charge is true, how do you prove it to be true?
Well, there's a few things, actually. So, and actually, when I was pulling up the other passages of Deuteronomy, those are some of the examples for proof that you would have to see there. Now,
wait, what does this mean? If the charge is true, how do you determine that she's not a virgin?
Well, so there's multiple things. Like I'm saying, that's what I'm saying. So first off, obviously, if you're finding no proof of the young woman's virginity, that would be one indication. It can't be the sole indication, but it would be one indication.
That's not what the Bible says. It doesn't say sole indication. That's what you're reading into the text.
No, that's exactly the point. It doesn't say it's the sole indication, right? It says, if, however, the charge is true and no proof of the young woman's virginity can be found. So this is not the sole indication of the crime being committed here, right?
But that's not what this text says.
That's exactly what it says.
For other evidence.
However,
this only gives you one standard.
Right? If, however, the charge is true.
Okay, so what else do you look for? What else do you look for?
So in Deuteronomy 19 and 5, it is made clear that out of the mouth of two witnesses must any sort of accusation be made, right? So that's one thing. We do need verifiable witnesses, at least two.
Wait a second, that's for a married couple, right?
No, that's for any crime, period. Especially crimes that have the death penalty.
Wait a second, hold on a second. So a girl doesn't bleed on her wedding night. She now has to go get two witnesses to back her up that she really is a virgin?
No, you have to get witnesses to prove that she's not.
That's right. Not what this text here says.
The text doesn't say anything about the witnesses. The witnesses is found elsewhere in Deuteronomy 19 and 5,
okay,
but you have to take the whole book of Deuteronomy in its totality.
But do you see what has happened here? Let's go along with this absurd reading of the text. Oh, okay, so you don't bleed on the bed sheet, but guess what? You still need two witnesses to prove that you're not a virgin. That's impossible.
No. That is not what it says. You need two witnesses to
the girl
prove
doesn't
that
bleed on the bed sheet now, but we still can't stone her to death because we still got to get two witnesses to verify that she is not a virgin. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it would have to be an accusatory thing.
Okay.
The husband himself would have to
let's
get the
go
witnesses,
along with
not
that.
her.
Let's just go along with that. Do you see how now she's stigmatized? And and especially in the Middle East cultures, now she's the talk of the town. Everyone's gapping and yapping. She didn't bleed on her bed sheet. She didn't bleed over here. So the damage is done. She's going to be stigmatized for the rest of her life. And as far as if we look over here, there in the actual text which we're reading over here, there's no mention of any kind of witnesses. But let's grant you this, this reading of the text. but now she's stigmatized here. And can you see that? Can you agree with that?
Well, absolutely, but stigmatization is something that human beings are going to do by themselves, and it doesn't actually matter what the
Well,
crime is.
why
I'll
would
give you
you
a perfect
subject
example.
a
Hang on.
sexually abused victim through all of this?
Let me give you a perfect example, though, because this is something that on this planet is just simply not avoidable. And I know that's a cynical outlook, but it's the facts. For example, the Me Too movement recently went all across the United States, right? Now, obviously, some people deserve to go to prison, and obviously, some people it was just some sort of a misunderstanding or something like that, right? There was enough evidence all across the spectrum with all the different accusations to prove there was lies, there was misunderstandings, there was outright sexual assault, so on and so forth. But it didn't matter because the stigmatization already happened because of the accusation, right? Now, what you find in the Bible as a result of that fact of human psychology is punishment for false accusations. But there's nothing you can do to get rid of the stigmatization of a false accusation because that's just simply the way human beings are.
So let me see if I understand you correctly. So you're saying they're going to get stigmatized anyways, is what you're saying, right? So it doesn't matter if God puts them through this stigmatization process. Is that correct? That he's actually directly responsible for stigmatizing them. It's going to happen anyways. Is that what you're saying?
It would literally happen to everybody in any crime who was falsely accused.
Let me prove you wrong, because there are many women. In fact, I have a Muslim friend, a girl. We're friends, and she talked, and she told me that she did not bleed on her wedding night. I didn't go and probe deep, and well, why not? No, but she said, you know what? The guy was very cool. He was Islamic, because Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Whatever happens between you, keep it." Well, let me get the exact test. I don't want to paraphrase here. So he says. Let me read it again. The most wicked among people in the eyes of Allah on the day of judgment is the man who goes to his wife and she comes to him and he divulges her secret. That guy was a very good Muslim. He understood what Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. And whatever happened in that room, he kept it right there. So don't you agree this is probably a better way of handling things today? Would you agree with that?
I would say a lot of this absolutely depends. So, for example,
which is better, the Bible's way or the Quran? Going through this witness program for a girl who doesn't bleed?
There's a lot of context, honestly, that needs to be kind of described here.
Which one is better here? Which way is better, the Islam or the Bible? Which one would you prefer here? Do you think is better?
Well, first off, I mean, I don't even know that's not even a fair comparison. And let me explain to you why, because this Quranic verse is as vague as a verse could possibly get. For example, the most wicked among the people in the eyes of Allah on the day of judgment is the man who goes to his wife and she comes to him and then he divulges her secret. Well, what secret? That could just literally be her confiding in him. And maybe Allah is really not pleased with men.
When he comes to him, you understand this phrase, he goes to her and she comes to him. This is clearly referring to sexual contact. Okay. And this is the way all Muslims are going to understand it. So and I don't know if you have to show me one person who can think otherwise when you hear that phrase.
I would like you to show me the opposite. Show me hadith that says you cannot spread the bedsheet. Or some Islamic scholar that says you cannot spread the bedsheet. Because I don't have to prove it doesn't say that. You have to prove it does.
Okay. We have no such thing in our religion which teaches to go and spread the bed sheets and go look for blood.
That's not the same thing, though. I want proof that this verse in particular.
Look. Let me ask you a question. You're kind of running away from the question, but the reading which we as Muslims have when we read this hadith is whatever takes place in the bedroom, blood or no blood or whatever, it stays there. He does not divulge her secret. Can you at least accept this is a good teaching?
I mean, if you see, the thing is, you're presenting it in a dishonest context, and I don't mean to be accusatory, but that is in a dishonest context. You haven't provided me any evidence, whether from hadith or scholars, right, that this verse is referring specifically to a correction of Deuteronomy, right? If the only thing you're saying, which is what you appear to be saying now, hang on just a moment. If the only thing you're saying is, which is what you appear to be saying now, right, is that when a man and a wife come together, they should not divulge the inner workings of the bedroom to their friends. And of course, that's a good teaching. That's a wonderful teaching.
Okay. Good.
However, if what you're trying to say is this is actually a correction when it comes to certain things like sexual sin, well, not only does the verse not indicate that, but absolutely not. Sexual sin needs to be dealt with, and it needs to be dealt with in a serious way. Now, of course, the Bible in the New Testament internalizes this, and of course, that's a whole theological discussion. But in the Old Testament, one of the things that was very clear was the Jews were supposed to live out the law of God, and the law of God demands perfection, and of course, human beings are not. That is the part of the reason why it is so incredibly hard. So let's
go back to this issue where, this witnesses. She doesn't bleed a sexually abused woman. She's not going to bleed. She's got to get some, but you still are not able to take that type of punitive action against her because you don't got two witnesses. But you still haven't explained to me. I mean, you said, well, it's going to happen anyways. I just proved to you, no, it's not going to happen anyways. There are many people who keep what's going on in the bedroom, not just Muslims, by the way. So it's not just going to happen anyways. You still haven't explained to us, why would God put a sexually abused girl through this whole process of bleeding on the bedsheet and then a witness program, which is actually a fabrication, but which was what you believe? Why go through all of this? It doesn't make sense. Why would you put a sexually abused woman through that?
Well, there's multiple things that need to be addressed. Just first and foremost, I have Deuteronomy 17:6 right here. Out of the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall he that is worthy to be put to death be put to death, but out of the mouth of 1 witness he shall not be put to death. Also,
okay, we already agree on that, but why would you put a sexually abused woman through all that?
I just wanted to point out, you were saying that this is your interpretation, but Deuteronomy.
No, I don't. Okay, fine. That's what the Bible says. Yeah. But you're evading the question.
Okay, why hang on. Let's just get to that. I just wanted to address that point.
Like
okay.
That?
Now,
why should women be stigmatized like that?
Well, to be honest with you, there's a few different reasons why this is something that should be made a law. So, for example, first reason, if you just want to talk pure practicality. There was the problem of things like cuckoldry and things like that in the past. There was problems with people who would actually end up having wives who would be rather hedonistic on the side, but then they would be cared for by rather rich men. This is something the man wanted to make sure wasn't happening to him. He didn't want to be raising somebody else's child.
You're not answering the question why a sexually abused woman should go through this.
Well, hang on. You can't keep saying a sexually abused woman, because that's like arguing, hey, abortion is okay because this one time maybe a woman might have been raped, and therefore the 99.9%.
Yeah, that's actually true.
Well, see, I firmly disagree. I think that's, but that's not the point. Okay. Not the point.
Well, let's get to Islam. Let's get to the Quran. And do you have any sign?
Well, hang on. No, I do want to.
Okay, finish up and let's get to Islam because we're running out of time here.
Okay. So when you say, well, this stigmatization isn't going to happen, I proved it with this particular example. Well, I also proved with my example that it absolutely is. Anybody who is falsely accused of a crime will be stigmatized as guilty of that crime. Right? Okay. The person who you were discussing, not only is it a personal antidote, whereas I relied on something that was actually a American phenomenon all throughout the country, right? But that person was not accused openly. Any person who is accused openly of a thing, there's going to be people who believe that thing. That stigmatization
we understand that.
is just simply going to happen. Right?
Okay, you've made this point, and we can agree to disagree on that. And let's start the discussion. What do you believe is a scientific error in Islam? Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously, there are a few different scientific errors that I believe are in the Quran. We're obviously going to be talking about one here for today, but if people want to, once again, see some previous videos I've done on it, I also have videos coming out in the future. We, of course, have discussed it. Just want to make sure everybody gets all of the resources there. So, I have here the Sahih International Version. It is Surah 23 and verses 14. By the way, if anybody has an objection to the fact that I use the Sahih International Version, please do comment. When you go to Qur'an.com, this is the first one that pops up, meaning it's roughly the American equivalent of the NIV version for the Bible, right? So just want to point that out. If that's not necessarily the most traditional one, then by any means, give me a new one, and I will look for the English translation. Nonetheless, so if we look into Surah 23, verse 14, then we made the sperm drop into a clinging clot, and we made the clot into a lump. Now, notice you see here of flesh, but you see of flesh in brackets. Why do you see of flesh in brackets? Well, brackets indicates that it was not actually found in the original text. So this is actually an insertion of the Sahih International Version. So in the Arabic itself, if you were to translate that into the English, what it would say is, then we made the sperm drop into a clinging clot, and we made the clot into a lump, and we made the lump bones, and we covered the bones with flesh. Now, of course, it wouldn't make much sense for this to say we made it a lump of flesh, and then we made the lump bones, and then we made more flesh, right? Well, basically, it's, okay, so did the flesh come before or after? This is part of the reason why I point out the Sahih International Version's brackets here don't really make any sense. But the reason they try to add those brackets is because what we know from science is this is not actually the way that baby formation goes, right? For example, you do not start off as the bones and then get covered with a lump of flesh. That's just not how it works.
Whoa. Wait, I don't run that by me again. You don't start off with bones. What do you mean by that?
So a baby in the womb is not formed as a lump of bones, then covered with flesh.
Did the Quran say a lump of bones?
It literally does. We made the clot into a lump, and we made the lump bones. And again, I'm skipping out the brackets.
Whoa. Wait, you've confused me. Can you share your desktop and
Absolutely.
just post the... Yeah.
Let me know when I am able to.
Oh. Go ahead.
Alrighty.
I think so. Make host. There you go. Go ahead.
All right, so we see here, and this is Surah 23:14, once again out of the Sahih International Version. Then we made the sperm drop into a clinging clot, and we made the clot into a lump, and we made the lump bones, and we covered the bones with flesh. Then we developed him into another creation. Now you will notice there are brackets there that say of flesh and from, but as you well know, brackets indicate that it's not actually.
Don't worry about the brackets.
Text.
Tell us where's the contradiction of science.
That is not how a baby is formed. You are not a lump of bones and then covered with flesh. The flesh actually comes first.
Okay.
This is why the
it does not say lump of bones in the text. Do you see what? There's no.
Yeah, it literally says, and we made the lump bones.
Okay, and that doesn't happen, is what you're saying.
Yes, you are actually flesh first, which is why the Sahih International Version actually tries to insert
let me go ahead and read this. It said basically you went from a mudgha, and then khalaqna, we made him into mudghatan, then a mudghatan idhaman. So can you please show me a reference from science that there is no lump, and then it goes, and there's this process that there was this lump, and then it doesn't go to bones? Where is that reference?
Well, hang on. That's not what I'm saying, actually. Now I can't obviously.
Maybe I might be misunderstanding you. What's the contradiction of science?
So what this is saying, right, is that this sperm drop becomes when it drops and it becomes a clinging clot, right? Then it becomes a lump of bones, right? It says, and we made the lump bones. So the bones come first, right? And we covered the bones with flesh. But that's not how it works. It's actually the opposite way. And the translators of the Sahih International Version
okay. So you're saying that the text of the Quran says we covered the bones with flesh. You're saying this never happens.
I'm saying that is not the process. Yes, it is flesh first, then bones, not bones first, then flesh.
Do you have any reference for what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me pull up a, let's see, what would that be, trimesters, baby formation? Let's go baby formation. There's some images so that we can have a representation. See if I can get this to be any bigger.
I'm going to put, while you look for this, I'm just going to put this on pause for a second.
All right, so here you see a picture of fetal development, right?
Hold on one second. Let me start the thing again.
Okay.
All right, go ahead, please.
All right, and let me actually kind of drag this out a little bit so that the picture gets a little bigger. I think that's about as big as I can make it. There we go. So here you see the stages of human development, and of course they are shown for us in actual images so that you can get a visual representation of what it is. Now notice what you do not find here. You do not find a lump of bones that then is covered with flesh, because that is not actually how baby development works.
Wait a second. You're looking at these pictures and just drawing conclusions of your own on these. Do you have a reference from a doctor which talks about this thing never happens? Not that you look at these pictures, and you're not an embryologist. You're not a doctor.
Well, of course. I mean, if we want to go through the stages of development more in depth, we absolutely can do that. Let's go actually and go.
Wait, it's going to take much longer. I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying, because I'm still confused what you're saying. You're saying that the bones, there's no stage where bones are covered with flesh. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that what the Quran says is that it is bones and then flesh, but that is actually not the case. It is the reverse. It is flesh and then bones.
So bones are created. The Quran is saying bones is created, then flesh comes. Is that what you're saying? Well, I'm say that again. I'm so confused.
Yeah, it is saying that. So yeah, here it is. We made the clot into a lump, and we made the lump bones. So it is bones, right? And we covered the bones with flesh. So it is bones, then flesh. right?
Correct.
They're saying the
Yes.
stage is stage 1. Well, I guess in this case it would actually be stage 2, but nonetheless, for the point of analogy, stage 1, bones. Stage 2, flesh. But that's not the case.
No, there's no stages like that. It's saying we covered the bones with flesh. And this statement you're saying is in direct conflict with a statement from modern science. Show it to me. Where is it?
Well, we did already show
Not what
the
not
pictures,
your
right?
interpretation of science.
We did
but
already
I
show,
want,
of course, those images, but here we have a actual website, right? So at 4 weeks, we get brain, which of course is an organ, and then the first bone, your spinal cord. Well, actually, you know that can be a little bit other things like nerve endings and stuff like that as well. The heart begins to form.
This contradicts exactly what you're saying. You get the spinal cord, then you get some flesh after that. Do you see all this fleshy stuff coming after that?
See, that's obviously not the case, though. It says right here, your baby's brain have begun to form. The heart begins to form. Right?
Here's what I need from you. Okay, here's what I need from you. All right. I want a statement from an embryologist or someone in the field who specifically and explicitly states that that when all the flesh is formed first, then the bones come. Because that's pretty much what you're saying.
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is the Qur'an is saying that there are bones here. It does not give any indication of flesh at all. It says there are bones, and then the bones are literally covered. That is the word that is being used. The bones are covered in flesh, right? But that is not what actually happens.
But you have shown nothing to prove that. So let me go ahead and I'm just going to try to do a little bit more research on this, I think, because here's you need to bring a reference from science. And I'm going to tell you why.
Okay, hang on.
Because there have been many people.
Check this out, right? Here's another reference, because this is the third now. I've shown you the images. I've shown you this website.
And none of these references are proving what you're saying.
Here's the third now. The process so it's ossification or osteogenesis is the process of bone formation. This process begins early in fetal development, usually by the end of the 8th week after conception. Notice this is saying at 8 weeks. We already have all of this. You have your baby's heart. It has a regular rhythm, major organs, things like the budding of arms and legs, so on and so forth, right?
So let me reclaim the host over here. Okay, so that obviously, here's why I want a direct reference, not your interpretation of science, okay? And so this is what I see here. Is that you're kind of masquerading as a scientist, and we are supposed to show something like from what I showed you, a direct conflict of the statement of modern science. Like, for example, a beautiful example of that is actually let me thing here. If I want to share my desktop, is that the mustard seed is the smallest seed that you plant in the ground. Okay, so that is a direct conflict with modern science. Now, here's why you have to bring a reference from science. Look at all of the embryologists and all of the doctors who have looked at this same verse that you are criticizing. Look at all these people. They have written in books on it. There are publications where they looked at the exact same verse you said, and it said it is in complete agreement with modern science. People like Professor Keith Moore, he's a world leader, scholar in the field of embryology. TVN Prasad, E. Marshall Johnson, they have all written books on the accuracy of embryology in the Quran. And they recited exactly the verse which you're quoting at and show that this is in complete agreement with modern science. Now, here's why you have, now these are Dr. Torshia, these are all references of embryologists who have commented and have praised this verse of the Quran that you are criticizing. So, and also, here's also another article for you. This is in the National Center for Biotechnical Information. Here is an article in which they published embryology in the Quran, and this is a government website, a science-based government website, and what you are criticizing as a scientific error is something which is actually people are showing how the human embryology is in complete agreement with modern science. So why am I demanding? Hold on, let me end on this point. Why you have to bring a reference from science, and I'm not going to allow you to just mouth off, well, I think it looks like this and it looks like that. No. Why you must bring a reference from science is because these issues have been peer reviewed. People like Keith Moore, Dr. Keith Moore, and other than them, they have lectured all across the world. They have presented all of this to many hundreds, maybe thousands of doctors. They've looked at this. And for you to come here tonight without a single reference from one of them, because if something contradicted science, they would have said, hey, Dr. Keith Moore, look, what you're saying is not true. This is the way it is. It's like this. And yet you've come here with no reference. So, and you don't understand embryology. Even me, look, I've studied embryology just doing these debates, and there's a lot of it I don't understand. So there, we have to have certain standards when we have these discussions. We have to speak with proof and evidences. So what I would like for you to do is bring a reference from science to show that what you are saying is true. I don't want your opinions here, okay? So, and I want to end on this note. I'll tell you, I want to give you 1 minute. I think you wanted to say something. Go ahead, please.
All right, so I just the record needs to be corrected here, and I'm sorry, but it just absolutely has to. I've now provided 3 different references
of your interpretations. Yeah.
No, none of them were my interpretation. Yeah. I'm reading one again. Ossification or osteogenesis is the process of bone formation. This process begins early in fetal development, usually by the 8th week after conception. That is a fact.
Okay, Dr. J.
It's written in
calling Dr. J.
No, hang on. That is other doctors. So by your same logic, since you are not a doctor, everything you have said can be discounted. What you're doing right now is an appeal to authority. What I'm doing is an appeal to evidence, right? The doctors have given me their evidence. They have said, no, this is how, and we have seen 3 different sources now. 1 image for visual representation, and 2 different people actually explaining the processes with words and things like that, right? Mm-hmm. And we have seen in both instances, right, that the bones do not form first. They form roughly after about 8 weeks of conception, after organs and flesh is forming, right? All you did is rattle off, well, these guys are scientists, and they said that they agree. Okay, well, there are scientists who believe that the earth is flat. Do you have any reference
from a scientist to back up what you're saying?
Show me the evidence.
Okay. Do you have any reference from science to back up what you're saying? Okay, look, I'm going to show you some.
I have actually given 3 in the course of this conversation. I don't know what else you want me to do.
Yeah, and okay, let me go ahead and share my desktop here. Okay, I didn't want to have to do this because you are giving your own wacky, quacky interpretation of a very complicated science.
I literally quoted it verbatim, Nadir. I'm sorry. You're wrong on this. I quoted it verbatim.
Okay, so now I'm going to share with you references from science, what they say. It says, and so it says here, by the 6th or 7th week of embryonic life, the actual process of bone development, ossification begins.
That's exactly what to be fair, I said 8th. This says 6th, but it's rough, so 6th to 8th. We'll give a little bit of a...
Now read this. It said the skeleton and fetus begins to develop bones about 13 weeks following conception. Bone gradually becomes harder and muscle tissue begins to develop. So this fits very well with what we read in the Quran about the bones being covered with flesh. Muscle tissue is flesh. I hope you can agree with that.
But it doesn't say. Hang on, no, because this cannot be.
No, we're done. No, we're done. I want a.
No, hang on. No, you can't say we're done. You can't say we're done. That's running away. That is running away. Hang on.
No.
You just showed what I was saying.
I've got to run away.
Is that the organs are forming? I showed you perfect examples of that with 3 different sources. Okay.
How is it that I brought for you?
For me. Hang on, you then quoted something for me that not only backed up what I said, but then pointed out.
Okay, thank you. We're done. I put you on mute.
All right. Well,
what
I'm
I want from you is a reference from the doctors who specifically look at this verse and contradict Dr. Keith Moore and all of the references of those doctors which I have presented to you. It has to, if it was really wrong, it has to be out there because Dr. Keith Moore presented his information for hundreds and hundreds of people to look and critique, and you don't have that. So, but thank you very much. We will continue our examination of the Bible and the Quran and which book contradicts modern science. Thanks.
All right. So it does need to be pointed out at this point. I'm sorry, but these conversations need to stop. Nadir, I'm going to send this video to you so you can get the end of it, but this is just simply not going to occur. What you just saw was one of the most dishonest things I think I've ever actually experienced in a debate, and I'm sorry to say that. And this is something that has been consistent now. Nadir took down our debates after it was shown that the Quran was contradictory on the subject of alcohol. Nadir went out of his way to try and hide behind the Arabic language after we showed that it was beyond any doubt that the Quran actually says the sun sets in a pool of murky water. We have seen that he has said, oh, you're just appealing to allegory, even though the parable of the mustard seed literally says, and he told a parable to them. And now we're seeing once again another example of this. Once again, quoting verbatim, development of bones, ossification or osteogenesis is the process of bone formation. This process begins early in fetal development, usually by the end of the 8th week after conception. His source said 6, so we'll say 6 to 8 weeks. And then by this point, the skeletal pattern is formed by cartilage and connective tissue membranes. Ossification begins. Right? That's what we saw. We also saw the source that showed you it visually. We also saw another source that quoted it and actually gave you like the breakdown 1 to 12 weeks and 28 weeks and so on and so forth, right? So this is not under any circumstance disputable. So I'm sorry, Nadir. I mean, if we're going to be running away every single time that I prove you wrong, then we're just not going to have these conversations. I'm sorry. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Shalom.